Blessed day, everyone. It's nice to get back again to our YouTube channel. And now our topic for the module 2 is about fire protection, fire prevention, and fire extinguishment. For the disclaimer, all information and pictures shown in these slides are for general education purposes only. All information herein are provided with good faith, and I have no intention to claim nor to own it. So credits to the owners. So the first lesson for this module 2 is about fire protection. What do we say when we talk about fire protection? Do we protect fire? Let us find out. So before we define fire protection, let us give a uh, perception to what is shown in the slides. You can see there the picture. So with that intensity of fire, there is a possibility that it will cause damages of property. It may also cause loss of life. It may result into destruction of property as well. So let us define property. Fire protection. Fire protection means it's the various methods used to stop, extinguish, and control. It says there, it says there various methods. So we do have different available methods depending on what the situations are in order to stop, extinguish, and control. So what do we stop? Or what is the purpose? Why do we need to stop, extinguish, and to control the fire? That is for against the possibility that it may cause destruction that a fire may cause. So fire protection is for eventual prevention of loss of life and property. Fire protection is also a study and practice of mitigating the unwanted effects. We don't even know what may happen. We can perceive, but we cannot tell the exact that may possibly or that may happen as a result. So what we can do in cases that the building is already on fire is to mitigate, to stop, to extinguish, and as well as control. It causes already damage, but as much as possible, we don't allow it that it may propagate, that may result to a bigger destruction or that may cause loss of life and loss of more properties. Fire protection refers to measures taken to prevent fire from what? Becoming destructive, reduce the impact of an uncontrolled fire, and save lives and property, especially when there are people inside of the building. Properties, if they can able to save other properties, if they can able to evacuate other properties, then so be it. Because there are also properties that may boost the effect or that may boost and may intensify the fire. So fire protection includes devices, wiring, piping equipment, and controls. We need to ensure that these following may able to be controlled so that it will not help to propagate or to spread the fire. Especially when the fire is still small, make it sure that this fire will not become stronger and bigger. The only way to mitigate the unwanted effects is to stop the propagation of fire, to extinguish one of the elements of fire, and also to control the fire that it will not cater other properties or even other building. So, what do we include for the implementation of fire protection? What do we include? What do we employ to make our strategies for fire protection becomes successful? So, we include as one of the measures for fire protection implementing safety planning practices and drills. If there is no planning, you will come to the point that you don't know what to do in cases that the fire may propagate and there will be a sudden explosion. You don't have any drills. You did not even try to make some drills to what you have planned. So planning, practices, and drills are important. We need also to include providing education on fire risk in asset and safety. So that we can able to know when the situation or in dealing the situation, we know when we say or we can able to identify if it is safe or not. Or what would be the possible approaches that you may employ to address the situation. We need to determine how risk it is and also for the safety. Because if you really want to extinguish the fire, make sure that you put your life also in a safety zone so that you could able to extinguish the fire. Do not make yourself that as a cause that will make the fire bigger and stronger. What else more that we may add that a firefighter or the Bureau of Fire Protection that may consider for the fire protection measures? Of course, you need to conduct research and investigations. It is essential to conduct research, to have knowledge, not only to become aware, but to have knowledge so that you may know how to deal different situations. And also you may include in your recommendations to the citizens that they must have to follow so that it will not so that they will not commit the same mistakes to what happened based on the past recorded incidents. You need to conduct research because what are those possible, what are the main reasons why it causes fire? So when you know already, okay, when you know already, you have knowledge, then so what are you going to do with your knowledge? Then you have to inform the people. You may also inform your subordinates, inform your colleagues. And most especially, you need also to conduct investigation. You need to prove something. You need to seek the truth and to seek the factual basis of your decision making. We don't we must not rely to what we know that we think it is true, especially if it is baseless idea or even thoughts. We must base on the factual basis. Another also, fire resistant building constructions materials and practices, or there must you have to follow the building code of the Philippines. And of course, training and testing of mitigating systems, whatever the concerned officers or whatever the plans formulated, then it must be put into practice. So there are four main objectives of fire protection. First one, to prevent destructive fire from starting. What do we mean by destructive fire? Okay? It is actually may cause of destroying material objects that may cause loss of life and as well as damage to properties. So, as much as possible, we don't allow that the fire will conflagrate, will propagate, will spread, but instead it must be extinguished immediately. Which the number two says one of the objectives is to extinguish, that is to stop or put out an ongoing destructive fire. When the fire is still small, then you need to extinguish it immediately. Do not wait that the fire will become more stronger and or the intensity of fire will increase. But as much as possible, if the fire is still small, then you have to extinguish it immediately. And as well as the third one, to confine a destructive fire at the place where it began, so that we can avoid the possibility of conflagration or propagation of fire. We need, if there is already a fire in the building, or let's say for example one of the rooms of the building is on fire, then we need to save other rooms in other building, okay, so that the fire may not um, cater the other rooms or even the other building. Otherwise, or when it happened, there is possibility that the damage of fire that may cause is more bigger. Next is to prevent loss of life and property when fire starts. So, in cases of fire or when there is already a fire, what the firefighters must do is to mitigate the damage, to mitigate the unwanted effects that a fire may cause. Okay, as part of the fire protection. So, what would be the primary objectives of fire protection? Of, among to what is among the four objectives, which one or which is the primary objective of fire protection? Which one? Of course, it must be to prevent loss of life and property. So, your primary objective is to save lives and property. That is the primary objective. So, what would be now the secondary objectives? That is to minimize interruptions of service due to a fire. Okay? Do not allow the fire hazards may hinder you to perform your obligations as a firefighter. That is to prevent, extinguish, and to confine a destructive fire. There are three basic essentials of fire protection. There are three. The first one is the study of fire. When we say study of fire, that is to learn the causes of fire. What makes the fire exist, or what is the root causes why the fire exists? What would be another is what would be the fire extinguishing techniques in order to extinguish or to put out the fire? And when fire is about to propagate, or when it is about to cause a fire, what are the detection and extinguishing detection alarm system or security measures to detect when there is a smoke or when there is a fire, which includes here the detection and extinguishing equipment, including their uses. And what else more? What else more does the study of fire may include? That is the rules and regulations related to building construction, which is already stipulated under the Fire Code of the Philippines and or the Building Code of the Philippines. Next is the active fire protection, and the last one is the passive fire protection. What is the distinction between these two? When we say active fire protection, it includes manual or automatic detection of fire. Again, it includes herein is the manual or automatic detection of fire. It is the use of, give me an example, use of, what do we see most like, or what are those detecting alarms, it's detecting systems that are being installed or that are installed in the malls or even in the buildings. Like for example, is the fire alarm. Another is the smoke alarm or smoke detecting alarm. And what else more does the active fire protection includes? Of course, the firefighting and as well as the first aid. How about passive fire protection? It includes the design of building and infrastructures, use of fire resistance material in construction, provision of isolating fire, firewalls and doors, smoke doors, training of firefighting, signage markings, and evacuation plans. Thus, active fire protection includes there is a function of, or there is a reaction, or there is a group of systems that require some amount of action or motion in order to work efficiently in the event of a fire. So motion includes the fire alarms or the smoke alarms. Action referring to the firefighting operations or the firefighting operations. On the other hand, the passive fire protection is a group of systems that compartmentalize a building through the use of fire resistance, as it was mentioned, or those examples that I have just mentioned. Again, active fire protection, there is a action or motion in order to work efficiently. Fire and smoke alarms works. Firefighters works for the operation. While passive fire protection includes only the systems that compartmentalize a building through the use of fire resistance or resistance rated walls or floors. To make it more clear for the passive fire protection are always um, protecting a building against fire and do not require any action to operate, unlike the active fire protection. So this system safeguards buildings by ensuring that the fire burns out quickly due to a lack of available fuel. When it is already protected, of course, it mitigates the possibility that a fire may propagate because the building at the time that is being constructed or when it is still under construction, the security measures or the fire protection measures are already being installed during the construction. When there is a fire, in cases of fire, it will not propagate. Unlike the active fire protection, of course, there is an action or motion that may require to uh, to act to become efficient. When in cases of fire, the firefighter use fire extinguisher to extinguish the fire. It is a part of active fire protection because there is a response, there is a firefighting operation incurred or happened. So in cases of fire, when there is a fire inside the room, however, the fire itself slowly diminishing by reason that it only absorbs small fuel until such time the fire is already extinguished. That is already a part of passive fire protection because before the fire incurred or during the construction of the building, there are already fire protections installed, employed in the construction of the building. While designing the building, you have already placed and installed fire protection. Okay, so that is passive. Now, another example, when the water sprinkler automatically activates when it detects smoke, that is an example of active fire protections. There is a that is the movement of the motion, or that is the function of the motion that activates the water sprinkler. So that is active fire protection. Let us move on to the fire classification. You have already knowledge pertaining the fire classification. And we all know that a Class A fire classification are fires involving solids. This type of fuel could be paper, What else more under the class A? Cardboard. What we see in the picture is the wood. So it includes in the furniture or fixtures and also fittings. It could even be the structure of the building. So those are only examples of class A. These are solid objects or material. In cases that this fire or class A is what you are dealing with in the fire incident, what do you think is the best type of fire extinguisher that you can make use? What do you think is the best type of extinguisher that you can make use? One of the best type that you can make use to extinguish class A fire is the water extinguisher. You can make use of the water, the pure water, to extinguish or to put out the fire. This is the most popular type of extinguisher because it can handle most fires involving solids. However, in cases that the class A fire nearby of the class A fire or nearby the object that is being fired is an there are electrical wires, you have to be very careful to of using the water. If that is if just in case you encountered that scenario, you better not use of water, but use the other extinguisher that can put out the class A fire and and also the to save or to protect the electricity to avoid the possibility of propagation or conflagration that may uh, an electricity may cause. Next is the class B fires. Okay, these are liquids, flammable liquids. Class B fires are fires involving liquids. The class A involving solid. Many of the fluids, liquids and chemicals used in workplaces that can be flammable or explosive. Like for example, cleaning fluids, solvents, fuels, inks, adhesive, or even paints. Even paints. Yet most of our buildings, most of our house are painted. In cases that you are dealing class B fires, what is the best type of extinguisher that you can make use? You cannot make use of water as we have discussed and the properties of fire. Even no matter how you extinguished the fire when the flammable liquids are poured into the water, which will float which will float when mixed with water, there is a possibility that it may reignite. So water is not the best type of extinguisher to extinguish the class B, but instead make use of the foam or powder extinguishers. There are fire extinguishers that can release foam or even powder to that is appropriate for the class B fires. Next fire classification is the Class C fire. And when we say Class C fires, these are electrical fires. Electricity is more or a source of ignition than a fuel. However, fires in live electrical equipment are an additional hazards because it is hard to extinguish when you are dealing Class C fires. You don't even know. You cannot make use of water, otherwise you will be electrocuted because water is a good conductor where the electricity may flow. So it is hard to deal with, but it doesn't mean there is no other extinguisher that can deal with classifiers. There are ways on how to ensure there are ways on how will you deal with the classifiers. You can try to uh, go and proceed to the fuse box. Okay, yung tinatawag nating contador. Okay, you can switch it down or switch it. You have to pull it down and make sure that uh, there is no electricity or current of electricity. Okay, so do not make use of other extinguisher that may serve as a good conductor of electricity. Otherwise, you will be electrocuted, or other may be electrocuted, or we expect there is a possibility of unwanted effects. Okay. Next is the Class D fires. Again, Class A, these are class of fires that are solid. Class B, these are classes of fire that are liquids, and for Class C is electrical fires, and Class D is the metal. So metals are not often thought of a combustible material. Some types of metals can be like sodium. Metals are also good conductors, helping to spread fire. We all know that gold, silvers, that when they are underexposed of heat, these golds and silvers will be melted. Yet, while melted, there is the heat. When this heat comes in contact with the other object, especially with the combustible materials, there is a possibility that these combustible materials will be burned. Especially when metals that are soft, all metals will soften and melt at high temperature. Diba yung gold nga, when we can able to um, change its physical appearance under heat. Okay? So all metals will all soften and melt at high temperature. Again, all metals, which can be a big problem when metal joists and columns are present in a fire as structural elements. Okay? So what is in cases of Class D fires, because most of our building have metals as well. We have also electrical wires, solid wires. So specifically for Class D fires, water can actually act as an accelerant on metal fires. Okay? Accelerant. Because because of high temperature, the water becomes will be we increase the temperature. What will happen now? The temperature will keep on increasing when there is always a source of heat. So how will you or how would you able to deal with the classifiers? There are dry powder extinguishers intended for the class D fires. The powder inside the extinguisher may vary depending on the type of metal risk it is designed for. So small metal fires can sometimes be smothered with dry sand. It can be smothered by dry sand. Yeah, you can place of sand there, okay, but not water because the water can be um, mixed with these metals, and what will happen? The temperature of the water will increase as well. So wala rin pinagkaiba. So the best way is to make use of you are going to smother with dry sand. Okay. Next, when all these classes of fire are present, let's say for example in building there is a solid, there is also liquid in there, and also the electricity, and as well as metals. So meron tayo yung class E, di ba? Class E. When all these four fire classifications are mixed together. Next, we have also the class K. In some other country, the term it as class F. So class K or class F are naturally of concern in the food service and restaurant industry. Such fires can be very dangerous and far more destructive than you may think. Wet chemical fire extinguishers have become popular in putting out these types of fires. Another good example, deep fat frying in spillages of flammable oils near to heat sources in kitchens. You know already that when you're cooking, there are some spill fats that are dropping out from the wall or even nearby the gas stove. That is why after you cook, you have to clean, not to wash only the plates, the spoons, the cups, but also to ensure to clean up all the mess that caused while you are cooking. Okay? Most especially, you can actually observe doon sa pinaglulutuan nyo. Diba? Parang oily. Ayan. So, the only type of fire extinguisher that you can make use is the chemical extinguisher. So, however, for small class F or class K fires, you can make use of fire blanket in cases that there is fire. Diba? Pag minsan kasi it also includes here in while you're cooking, di ba, may ginalingan mo masyado, ginalingan mo, napalakas yung apoy, dinamihan mo yung mantika, okay? Naging chef ka for that time, hindi mo natansya, ay mayroong combustible material at the top of the kitchen or at the top of the gas stove, natamaan, nasunog, ayun na. Okay? So that is a part of the class F or even the class K fires. So next is we will be talking about fire extinguisher. So what is fire extinguisher? It is a portable or movable apparatus used to put out a small fire by directing onto a substance that cools the burning material, deprives the flame of oxygen, or interferes with the chemical reactions occurring in the flame. It is actually a short distance of the nozzle between the nozzle and the fire, what the fire extinguisher is capable of. There are different types of fire extinguishers designed to put out the different classes of fire that we have already mentioned a while back. So selecting the appropriate the fire extinguisher is an important consideration, because if you made use of a wrong extinguisher, there is a possibility that the fire will propagate or conflagrate, which we technically term as bite back, which that instead that you are trying to put out the fire, but since you used the wrong fire extinguisher, as an effect or as a consequence, the fire becomes stronger and bigger. So the wrong extinguisher actually may make a fire emergency worse. However, the Class C fires rated fire extinguisher put out the fire by using chemical that does not conduct electricity. Okay, as long as the fire extinguisher for Class C will not help and will not serve as a good conductor for electricity where it may flow. So you will just going to read this table is stipulated in your notes. Okay, so it enumerated here in the fire extinguisher type that you can make use for any for the classes of fire, and the second column states or enumerated what are those classes of fire that a fire extinguisher is efficient. And for the third column, it discusses here the limitations and overview pertaining the use of fire extinguisher on the uh, towards the classes of fire. So let us now proceed to the label of the fire extinguisher. So here, there are types of fire extinguishers, and each fire extinguisher has its own functions, depending on what classes of fire that you are dealing with. As it was enumerated and mentioned in the table, it only emphasizes or it only means that not all fire extinguishers have the same uses, but instead it depends on what classes of fire that you are dealing with, because they have different contents. They have different contents. Okay. So all portable fire extinguishers must be approved by a nationally recognized testing laboratory such as Underwriters Laboratories, UL or Factory Mutual Research to verify compliance with applicable standards. Because you might not even know that you are buying fire extinguisher um, that are not what do we call um, compliant to the existing policy. You don't even know what is inside. You don't even know the uh, the functions of the fire extinguisher, because this fire extinguisher that has no label may be perhaps made by anybody who wants to earn money only. Even it may deceive other people, even it may cause loss of life or even property. Equipment that passes the laboratory's test are labeled in given an alphanumeric classification based on the type and size of fire it will extinguish. Okay, so here are the parts of the fire extinguisher. So that is the discharge label, discharge lever, and then this is the discharge locking pin and seal. This is the discharge hose. That is the discharge nozzle. That is the discharge orifice. That is a pressure gauge, but some fire extinguisher doesn't have this kind of pressure gauge. Carrying handle. This is where it will show the whether or not this fire extinguisher passed or have undergone the examination. And this is the body. So how to use fire extinguisher? How to use the fire extinguisher? So by following the pass system, pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Let us watch the short video. So it shows here the proper use of fire extinguisher. So fire extinguisher only applies to small fire, okay? But if the fire is bigger, fire extinguisher is not appropriate. So what are you going to do first? Okay, make sure that you have with you or there is a fire extinguisher, and make sure that you keep yourself nearby the door, because in cases that when the fire resists, you have a way to escape. Okay, so the distance of possibility 6 to 8. Okay, so here now the pass system. So what are you going to do? You have to pull the pin, but before pulling the pin, you have to remove first the seal. Okay, and then next is you have to hold the nozzle pointing out the base of the fire, and then once you aim already, then you have to squeeze the trigger, and then afterwards, once while squeezing the trigger, you have to move the nozzle of the fire extinguisher side to side. Okay, that is how you use the fire extinguisher. So let me repeat again. First, pull the pin. This will also break the tamper seal. So when you have a fire extinguisher, when it is not yet used, there is the seal or the tamper seal. Because if there is no tamper seal, perhaps the fire extinguisher is already used, or someone or somebody used the fire extinguisher already. So meaning the fire extinguisher may have is already empty. Okay? So if it is not yet used, you can see and you can observe that there is still a tamper seal. So you have to remove first the tamper seal, then you can remove now the pin, or you can now pull the pin. Next is you have to hold the nozzle of the fire extinguisher. So you have to point towards the base of the fire. But why do we need to put it on or aim it on the base of the flame? It's just because it is where the source of ignition, no source of fire, a source of fuel. So you have to extinguish where this source of fuel are coming out. Because when you only aiming the top of the fire or the flame, you cannot extinguish the fire. But it's just because there is still the source of fuel or the ignition. Okay? So once you aim towards the base of the fire, then what are you going to do next? Then a squeeze. Squeeze the discharge label. Squeeze the handle so that it will release the extinguishing agent. Then you will not only keep yourself steady, but instead you have to move or sweep the nozzle from side to side at the base of the fire until the extinguisher is completely empty, assuring that the fire is out. Again, fire extinguisher is only applicable when the fire is still small. But if the fire is a big, fire extinguisher is not appropriate. So you better get out, wait for the arrival of the firefighters if you don't have any other chance to deal the fire because you don't have other extinguisher that you can make use. Not unless you have and you know what to do. Okay. Remember, when you are dealing a fire, a small fire using a fire extinguisher, always keep yourself that you have a way going out at the door. Because in cases that the fire resists or you cannot put out the fire and you have already empty fire extinguisher, you can able to escape. Okay? Because if you will not do that or you will not or you let yourself or you keep yourself away from the door and when the fire resists and becomes stronger and bigger, it is hard for you to escape now. Okay? That is the essence. Why do we need to keep ourselves to have always a way at the door for you to escape in cases that you don't have any or you can no longer extinguish the fire. And for the lesson 2, we will now talking about fire prevention. So, what is meant by fire prevention? It is also various methods because you have many ways on how to prevent fire from from occurrence. These are various methods or safety measures utilized to stop harmful or destructive fires from starting. It is also requires segregating the three elements of the fire triangle. But there are four elements, which include the chain reaction, because when you merge the three main elements, such as the heat, the oxygen, the fuel, it will cause a chain reaction before a fire will begin. Okay, so you need to remove one of the elements of fire so that the fire will not occur or will not incur or will not happen. So what is the purpose of fire prevention? Why do we need to have fire prevention plan, programs, or strategies? The purpose of the fire prevention plan, strategies, programs is to prevent a fire from occurring in a workplace, anywhere. It describes the fuel sources, hazardous or other materials that can be found on site that could initiate or contribute both to the spread of a fire as well as the building systems, such as fixed fire extinguishing system and alarm system in place to control the ignition or spread of a fire. It is a proactive measures to avoid the occurrence of fire. We had already discussed and give you an overview about the main causes of fire. To avoid that, you have the proactive programs or programs that will inform anyone and anybody, everybody, that those prohibitions and protocols and policies that they must have to follow to avoid fire accidents or the possibility of or the causes of fire. So I ask you, what does the fire prevention requires to segregate, to isolate, to extinguish, to put out fire? The answer can be found in the second paragraph of your notes. So let us talk about fire prevention measures. Measures for fire prevention are just as important as safety measures in the event of fire. But let us first distinguish fire protection and fire prevention. In the fire prevention, it involves, like I said, proactive measures, proactive steps, proactive programs to reduce fire hazards, to reduce the possibility the that a fire may occur, and also to reduce or to mitigate a chance or chance any chances that the materials will ignite or even objects will ignite. While fire protection, it includes the ins- um, installing of the alarms, suppression systems, including herein the sprinkler systems, fire extinguishers, or any other extinguishers, and any systems or technology that will notify, will inform, or alert other people to monitor the fire or to for them to evacuate in cases that there is a fire. So going back, fire prevention measures for fire prevention are just as important as safety measures in the event of fire. The enforcing authority will require fire risk assessments that is most important, that must have to be considered and must be done in order to ensure, in order that you may formulate a good plan, that you may able to formulate a good strategies that you may employ, and safety arrangements to cover fire precautions which prevent fire, just as it will require coverage of fire precautions designed to protect people in the event of fire. So it includes herein the security provisions to help prevent willful fire racing in our zone. Another also is the placing of prohibition like no smoking signage. You may also place there the smoking area. Then next is positioning of heat sources to prevent contact with combustible material. Like for example, the heat or there is a source of heat When this comes in contact with the combustible material, there is a possibility that the combustible material will ignite, since this combustible material absorbs heat from the source of uh, yes, a source of heat. Then next is system of work. You must have the protocols or these policies that must have to be followed to prevent accumulation of easily ignitable rubbish or paper. What are you going to do with this paper, with the plastics? So there must be a designed area where you will trash your um, papers. And then control of contractors or employees using blue lamps, cutting, or welding equipment. Risk assessment and control in the purchasing of articles and substances to avoid the introduction of fire hazards where possible, most especially if you have chemicals. Okay, so you have to include what is the safest area where you will store those chemicals or even those flammable material or combustible material. Okay, will it be on your storage room? Okay, because there are some products that requires to be stored in a cold area. Otherwise, when it is stored in a hot area, there is a possibility that these chemicals may explode and will cause propagation of fire. Next is risk assessment and control for the use of articles and substances which pose fire hazards to avoid the manifestation of fire risk. And then maintenance programs for electrical wiring and appliances. Of course, in cases of you heard sounds caused by these electrical circuits, then you need to report immediately to the electricians or to the concerned personnel. Okay, and if you found out there that there's a need to be checked and monitored and fixed, then you have to call the attention of the electrician. Then temperature control that avoids need for portable heaters or even coolers. Design or positioning of heaters, machinery, or all office equipment so that the ventilators cannot be obstructed. Okay, let's say for example, instead that the ventilation will help to remove those heat inside, it was covered by the uh, furnitures. So what will happen now? The temperature will always remain inside and a possibility that it will increase because the temperature is already covered with the furniture. Again, ventilation is more important, especially when there are some source of heat that are being released inside the building or room. Next is adequate cleaning of work areas, adequate supervision of cooking facilities, of course. Diba? May mga napapa-news that cause of fire is uh, pwede nilang naiwan yung kanilang linuluto, nasunog, or gas leak. Okay? And then spatial engineering solutions such as to make it impossible for a fire to begin or take hold by controlling the presence of oxygen, fuel, or energy. These three components, the so-called fire triangle, are the three prerequisites for fire. However, it is already explained under the fire tetrahedron that there is always a chain reaction before a fire may exist. So what are the fire prevention strategies? Prevention is the most important part of any risk management strategy. By mitigating risk in advance, organizations save time, effort, and money. Fire risk management is no exemption. Prevention is key. Fortunately, there are many strategies an organization can put in place to help prevent fires. Of course, much prevention is better than cure. Remember that, of course, because we don't even know and we cannot extend our perception what are the possible effect of a fire, possible effect of the destruction when there is a fire. Okay. First is to consider the hazards. When designing a fire prevention plan for your organization, you need to assess the hazards. What will happen, or in cases that there is a fire, what do you think that may happen? What are those hazards that may hinder or defer employees, persons in those who are inside, or those firefighters to enter the building, enter our house? Okay? If these furnitures or if these objects may cause hazards in cases of fire, then let us move it to other uh, area or perhaps we can design better area where these furnitures can be placed. So that it is very important because in cases of fire, you must have to know that you have a safest way to get out the house in cases of fire. There is, let's say, for example, there must be an emergency exit because you only have one door to get out of your house, and yet your door is near with the combustible materials. So what are you going to do? So make an fire exit, or you can move the combustible material or flammable material to the most safest area. Next is to ensure buildings are up to code. It must also follow the building code of the Philippines, the fire code of the Philippines. So consider all aspects of the construction, including the type roof, the doors, the windows. So before you design a or when designing a building, make sure that you have also need to consult with the Bureau of Fire Protection. Or while constructing, you need also to call the attention or may request from the office of the Bureau of Fire Protection in order to inspect the building that is being constructed, so they may give recommendations what are the safest design of the building that they must have to construct, so that when once constructed, we can say that the building have passed the standards written in the law or required by the Office of Bureau of Fire Protection before they may give you a permit. So let us consider the fire resistive. Has the best fire resistance rating generally reinforced concrete or protected steel construction. See, it's possible it is fire resistant. So it is a form of passive fire protection. Because while designing or while constructing, you are already placing and installing fire resistant materials that in cases of fire may occur, the fire will automatically put out. Okay. Then next is for the non-combustible, constructed primarily of materials that aren't combustible. Examples include unprotected steel in hollow concrete blocks. Okay, this allowing to produce, these are non-combustible material that will not release vapor nor fuel. Next is regularly inspect buildings and equipment. That is the most important thing. Okay? So you need to designate someone who will inspect, or if you are in your house, of course, you will have to check. And you, as a criminology student, starting right now, starting today, you need to conduct a risk assessment, fire risk assessment inside your house. If there is a need of consultation, you may ask your instructors, the guidance of the Bureau of Fire Protection, so that they may assist you. And then build employee awareness and training programs. It is also important that the employees will have to be aware, not again aware only, but knowledgeable, and it must be put into practice. You must have drills, okay? And instilling education or fire prevention educations is important also to employees or even in the family, even in the school. Next is uh, designate internal safety officers. Safety officers can be line of communication between frontline employees and risk managers. And then report fire hazards, incidents, and near misses. That is the most important thing that a employee or students or other people that may contribute to that ensure to prevent a fire. Okay. So when employees see a potential fire hazard or someone notified or someone saw or observed something, then they must have to report immediately, quickly, as soon as possible to the concerned person or to the supervisor, so that the supervisor may give appropriate action. Then take appropriate cautions based on identified hazards. During the risk fire risk assessment, then you must have um, precautionary measures, okay, addressing those identified hazards, or what would be the appropriate action to deal with those identified hazards. Okay, so you need to be careful with explosive materials. Do not overload outlets. So you know already the identified hazards. So you have to inform employees and students, your family, that please we need to observe the recommendations and suggestions because these were taken during the fire risk assessment. And these are the identified hazards. Thus, we placed and enumerated herein the suggestions or even recommendations, um, system works that we have to follow. Okay. Dito na pala, yung saksakan, hindi na pwedeng saksakan ng marami, konti lamang. Okay. So yung our aircon, we have to give rest, hindi pwedeng lagi naka-on maghapon. Parang ganun yung example. In case of fire, strategies that will minimize the damage of fire caused if it does occur. Ito naman ko pag meron ng apoy. Okay. So next, first is the fire detection systems. So buildings, schools, house, if possible, sa bahay, they have may also placed or may naka-standby na alert system. Like for example, water sprinkler. Because in building, kaya mapapansin nyo, it is actually a prerequisite of the building or even the school that they must have a water sprinkler or they have this alarm system. Okay? So this fire detection system will detect such as the smoke detection system, uh, and then like for example the water sprinkler, it detects heat, it will activate the smoke detector when it absorbs smoke, it will alarm and it will also activate the water sprinkler. Okay, here is an example. It only the fire detection system may only activate when there is a motion of those fire detection system will only activate when it only receives motions of indications of possibility of occurrence of fire or the fire. Okay? Yan yung setup ng fire detection system. Next is know what to do in case of fire. What are you going to do? Of course, you have to evacuation. You must have evacuation plans. You know where is the escape routes you may proceed, or what are the you must have to familiarize yourself. You have to be familiar with the escape routes. Okay? Kaya nga, it is essential for all buildings or even malls, schools, that there is evacuation plans and escape routes posted so that whoever will pass by onto that building or onto that mall will know where they may proceed in cases of fire. So they may must have also to conduct regular fire drills. Okay, make sure that there must be a time assessment. Okay, kailangan yan yung time assessment, hindi pwedeng pabanding-banding na naglalakad dyan. We have to take it seriously when there is a fire drill or when we participate in fire drills. Create fire preparation plans. Designate a meeting place at least 100 meters away from the premise. Then fire exits must be regularly inspected and maintained. So what are you going to do in case of fire? Then make use of the evacuation plans that are posted in as well as escape routes. Okay. So how will you use the what you have understood and what you have experienced during the fire drills? Then put into practice what is the best practices that you have learned during the fire drills. And those plans that had been made, then you have to apply it. And of course, in cases that you have already evacuated the area, then you have to get away from the area where the fire or where the building that is, or get away from the fire scene. They do not talk each other, have meeting nearby the fire scene. No. And then you can make use of fire exits if the other doors are not possible or other routes are not possible. Okay. So here it all includes here the exit strategy. Okay. You have already watched and heard how to apply this following in cases of fire. Next is the fire suppression systems. Organizations can consider automatic or manual fire suppression system that will stop a fire from spreading. Automatic fire suppression systems include sprinkler systems, chemical suppression such as carbon dioxide and halogen systems, and fire doors. It is crucial that fire doors are never forced or propped open as this drains their effectiveness. Next is the, or let us watch some short video. So based on the short video, there is the fire prevention protection, active fire protection, because these are installed alarm system that will activate only when it receives motion, and where there is an indication of possibility or indication of fire, or when there is a possibility that a fire may occur. It shows here, it shows there how the fire will activate, or fire alarm will activate. It also shows there how the water sprinkler will activate. But let me go back to the last slide. Okay, I will show you again the video. So what do you think this guy is doing? He's going actually and in escape routes of his house. After he made a fire risk assessment of his house. And here is now the result. He has already an escape plan. So you have to be very careful in making of your escape routes. Make it simple here. Yes, there must, you will not only rely to one smoke alarm, but in each room there must be smoke alarm, because fire can start from anywhere of your inside of your home, if you inside of your house. So what are you going to do now in case of fire or during the activation of the alarm? Do not be panicked, and do not be panicked, but instead you need to execute your escape route plans. So there you go. You followed. So for the related laws, uh, we have Presidential Decree number 1185, Fire Code of the Philippines. Presidential Decree number 1096, Building Code of the Philippines. Then Republic Act 6975, the DILG Act of 1990. And then Republic Act number 9514, which is the revised code of the Philippines of 2008. 2008. So these laws will be tackled as a part of our discussions for the final topics. So let us now proceed for the lesson 3, which is the fire hazard. What do you think, or what comes in your mind when you read or heard fire hazard? We all know fire is already a hazard to everyone, especially when you are encountering a fire. So fire hazard is any condition or act that increases or may cause increase in the probability that fire will occur, or which may obstruct, delay, hinder, or interfere with the firefighting operations and the safeguarding of life and property. Take a look on the highlighted words: obstruct, delay, hinder, or interfere. It does not only mean that it will cause fire or it may help to propagate the fire, but also it includes herein what may cause a person trapped inside difficult or hard to escape. And it is hard for the firefighters to get inside because of these fire hazards. Anything, let's say for example, it is hard for the firefighter to get inside because of um, the possibility that an electricity may cause. They cannot get inside because it's hard to say there is a we can say that the building may collapse. Okay, anything that will put the life of the firefighters to risk, okay, can be considered a fire hazard. Okay, so in the police parlance, we have also the police hazards. Okay, but in the fire hazards is a term used for the firefighting firefighters. But technically, fire hazards are anything that may obstruct, delay, or hinder or interfere anything firefighting operations in extinguishing the fire, to save the victims inside, or to save other properties. Okay, it in this will it includes the following that I have just mentioned. So in this picture, what do you think? What do you see are the fire hazards? Let's say, for example, that there is already a fire existing inside. So what do you think are the fire hazard or the possible fire hazards? Okay, you might also see there the labels. Okay, the first one is the um, placing lit smoking materials, okay, or incense near flammable items. Okay, yung mga, for example, yung mga paper. Okay, look at the cigarette nearby the papers. Okay, another also is overloading electrical outlets. Can you see it? Yes. And then we have also the carpets, or even perhaps that is the curtain on top of the light. Remember, light produces energy, produces heat, which when the curtain exposed to heat, well, of course, a curtain is also a good conductor of fire. It is a combustible material. Next, what next? What do you see? What else do you see? It is the lighting candles near flammable decorations. Another also, number 5, leaving cooking and food unattended. No one is monitoring, or no one have noticed that they leave the room where the gas is still on. And then ironing on flammable surfaces. Just few minutes, just few seconds, there is possibility na pwedeng masunog yung damit. Another else, okay, you may consider the electrical wirings. Yan. Those are examples of the fire hazards. So what are the main causes of fire? Okay. So we have already mentioned, but let me reiterate again, like these are following. First is the electricity. Okay, can be neglect or misuse of wiring that may cause short circuit, or overloading where the electricity or the wire used, or the wire of the plug used is not intended for 220 volts or 120 volts. Then rubbish and waste material. So of course, fire is likely to spread through accumulated waste. Then smoking. Okay. Careless of discarding cigarette butts, like for example, what happened in Baguio City, the Christmas tree. Someone who discarded cigarette butts out there, and then what happened now? It burns totally. It burns uh, the big Christmas tree in Berham Park at Baguio in Baguio. Then yung cooking, kitchens provide opportunities for a fire to start in materials on which it can feed. And then heating appliances, portable heaters are a treat when placed beside combustible furniture fittings. And then combustible materials, you know that already. There are also flammable materials. When we say flammable materials, it is below flash point of 37.8 degrees Celsius or below 98 degree Fahrenheit. While combustible materials, these are with flash point that is above 37.8 degrees Celsius or above 98 degree Fahrenheit, which requires more temperature before it will ignite. So flammable liquids, glow solvents are all liable to combust unless stored and used properly. Okay, so that is why they place danger there. So these are most likely should be stored or they must be stored in a cold area. Like I said, when this is stored in a hot area, there is a possibility that it will explode at any time when it only absorbs the required heat. Next is the arson or willful fire raising. It can be a incendiary cause of fire. Someone who intentionally burn the house, the building, okay. Next, we talk about the hazardous conditions. First, existence of dangerous or unlawful amount of combustible or explosives in the building not designed to store materials. Defective or improperly installed facilities or equipment that we already talked about, for example, in the accidental wiring, okay? Loss of uh, screws that may cause short circuit, lack of adequate exit facilities, obstruction at fire escapes or other designated opening for firefighters, dangerous accumulation of rubbish waste and other highly combustible materials, accumulation of dust in ventilation system or grease in the kitchen, that is the class A or class A K fires, and then building under repair, very old building or building that is primarily made of combustible materials. So this can be a hazardous or may obstruct or may hinder or interfere the firefighting operations because this may hard for the firefighters to get inside or to respond the fire scene, or there are some of it that may propagate or that will conflagrate the fire. Okay. And the last one is to carry out a risk assessment. After you have conducted a fire risk assessment, you will not just going to place it or to keep it, but you have to carry it out. You have to perform it. You have to employ it. If you have found that there is a need of replacement, you need to, it requires repair, it requires refurbishment, it requires to reconstruct, then you may do so. There are three elements in identifying hazards. First, sources of ignition, sources of heat that can become hot enough to ignite materials found at the premises. And we have already discussed the sources of ignition, the sources of the heat. So, what do you think in your house or in your building, in your classroom, or in the school, the possibility of where the source of ignitions may come out? The source of heat may come out. You have to identify because those can be the potential that may carry out fire. Another sources of fuel, anything that burns, we all know that. And sources of oxygen, which is present in the air around us. Of course, you cannot control air. Yet we can control air, but we cannot stop the air, the movement of air, because the air is already existing in the atmosphere. The only we can do is uh, to have a measure to control the temperature. Okay? To control the temperature. And be careful with the backdraft again. When there is a there is already the threat that a backdraft may occur. Then you have to control the passage of oxygen. Okay, so that's all for now. Thank you so much, and I do hope that you will read the next topic of our next the succeeding topics. Thank you so much, and God bless to all of you.